The Watership Down Podcast is intended for listeners who are familiar with the plot. There definitely will be spoilers. This episode is scripted by Newell Fisher, Opugee and Leea Mäkelä. It is recorded and edited by Newell Fisher. Hello, and welcome to the Watership Down Podcast episode 205, in which we will be looking at the portrayal of Hazel from the 1978 film to the 1996 book Tales from Watership Down. But first of all, I need to explain the image used for this week's episode, which is from the 1999 to 2001 TV series, which we'll be looking at in the next episode. When I decided that there would be 4 episodes on Hazel, I decided to use 2 images from the 1978 film, one from the TV series and one from the Netflix series, which means that the image used this week might seem strange considering the content. Hopefully this explains it. Next, there has been a comment from Hazel member Opugee on the latest episode on YouTube that is worth quoting here. It refers to Hazel encountering humans who don't want to hurt him. Quote, "What I often like in xenofiction literature is the perspective of animals on the friendly behaviour of humans. There is a book called Raven Quest by Sharon Stewart, where a young raven sets out on a dangerous journey to reclaim his honour. At one point, he gets hit by a telegraph pole and some people take him home to nurse him back to health. The raven is surprised that the human doesn't kill him right away, but instead feeds him the best food he has ever eaten. And while staying in a cage, he is puzzled by the two legs' motives." Similarly, in Hunter's Moon by Gary Kilworth, there's a similar theme when an injured fox is spotted by some people in a car and taken inside. His family assumes he will be killed, since they had no friendly experiences with humans before, but then it turns out that these people took him straight to a veterinarian. End quote. Thank you, Opugee. The exercise of trying to account for Hazel's terrifying experience at the hands of humans was a very interesting one, and I think your examples help to explain why. Hazel member Leea Mäkelä has also been in touch with some interesting thoughts on Hazel's leadership style. Quote, "There was a Finnish book about leadership theories applied to Lord of the Rings called Management by Sauron that was based on author Harri Hitako's doctoral dissertation in 2008. I haven't actually read the popularised version, that is apparently available also in German, but not in English. I read the doctoral dissertation online when it was new, and it happened around the same time I was rereading Watership Down for fun. I remember that it made me pay attention to how well Hazel matched the type Aragorn was described to be, and notice another detail that Hazel and Aragorn seem to have in common, though that wasn't really brought up in the management theory. They are both healers. In Lord of the Rings, Aragorn's healing abilities are used even as a plot device, since the people of Gondor recognise their rightful king as a healer. Hazel as healer isn't really highlighted like that, but once you start to pay attention, he's really described as the one who treats others' wounds throughout the story. And I think that side of him hasn't really been paid attention to in the series adaptations. I can't remember if the original film brought it up or not. I had to Google Management by Sauron as I couldn't really remember when it originally came out, nor if it has translations. Apparently, some of the criticism it got included that Watership Down would have been more suitable for study of leadership theories than Lord of the Rings. End quote. Thank you, Leea. These links with Lord of the Rings do seem to come up from time to time, which is interesting in itself, as is the idea of Hazel as healer. Anyway, let's get back to Hazel and his first portrayal on film. The portrayal of Hazel from 1978 to 1996. Let's just get my bias out of the way from the very start. In my opinion, John Hurt's voice portrayal of Hazel, as well as his visual portrayal in the 1978 film of Watership Down, was the best of all the portrayals of this key character over the last half-century. He is the first rabbit we see after the opening, and he is portrayed in minute detail before the film has to resort to the level of detail that was possible at that time. There is no mention here of Hazel possibly joining the Owsla after the episode with the Owsla members taking the plant Fiver found. Within the constraints of the film being such an abridged version of the story, the way Hazel deals with Fiver's vision, casually eating grass at first and grasping how serious he is dealt with well, as is the meeting with the Thrayara and departure, all of which follow rapidly. However, we do not see this Hazel's process as he decides to leave or his persuasion of others to do so. Hazel's threat towards Captain Holly, as the smaller rabbit, already carries authority, especially after the addition of the owsler, cutting off most of those who want to leave. This Hazel is defending all of them from arrest, having already lost most of his party, rather than just Bigwig and Silver. Hazel's decision to go into the woods to get clear of the owsler is followed by a brief sequence in the woods at night leading to the river, where Bigwig's discovery of the dog leads to Hazel's resolve to stay with Fiver and Pipkin in the face of Bigwig's impatience. Fiver has already explained what kind of home they are looking for here, which gives Hazel added motivation to cross the river. Once across, courtesy of a piece of wood, the sequence of events is changed, with Bigwig getting a chance to show off his knowledge of roads before Hazel gets to find the bean field where they can rest. And as Hazel has the idea of resting there, we get our lost paragraph episode earlier than the book, as Bigwig says the day he calls Hazel Hazel Ra will be the day he stops fighting. This Hazel loses his only doe at the beanfield, as Violet, who does not appear in the book, ventures into the open and is taken by a bird of prey. For the sake of plot tension, this Hazel is not going to be allowed to be so successful. In the face of this first loss, Hazel just says we better keep moving. The going now gets tougher as they rest at night in a derelict church, which takes the place of the later barn in the book, as they are attacked by rats. The territory that follows this is never referred to as the Common, but basically is, and it is here that Hazel, during rain that has arrived earlier in the book, faces a far briefer rebellion from Silver, which is rapidly interrupted by the arrival of a strange rabbit. Hazel gets no credit for getting them this far. Their stay at the Warren of the Snares is very brief here. However, Hazel rapidly picks up on the fact that you cannot ask where anyone is here. After a good meal of flayrad, their host Cowslip, having rejected a tale of Elachera, quotes the unnamed Silverweed briefly, which is sufficient to cause Fiver to bolt outside. The confrontation with Bigwig follows, with Hazel not even having time to go a little way with Fiver before Bigwig leaves to turn the rest of them against him, and promptly gets snared. Hazel's behaviour as they try to rescue Bigwig from the snare is broadly true to the book. However, his behaviour once they realise Bigwig is dead is more overtly grief-stricken than in the book, where Hazel is immediately thinking of practicalities. And the funereal proverb is spoken by Hazel in an overtly religious fashion. With Bigwig revived, and Fiver having harangued them all for wanting to stay in this deadly warren, they set off for the distant Watership Down, without Hazel having a chance to show some mercy, as there is no strawberry here. And now there is a major change of plot, as they rest near Nuthanger Farm, and Hazel decides to take Pipkin on a foray to the farm before they get to Watership Down, or Holly arrives on the down, or Keehar for that matter, and certainly before they send Keehar looking for does. So this initial foray to the farm is perhaps a bit more foolhardy than in the book. It results in the earlier finding of the hutch rabbits in order to help summarise the plot, and in the introduction of the cat. But at the slight expense of Hazel's credibility, one might argue. And then, on the way down the ditch leading from the farm, they encounter a lone Holly, and Hazel's decision to leave Sandalford is utterly vindicated before they even reach Watership Down. Holly also speaks of a place called Ephrafa, a result of his impossible journey from Sandalford to Watership Down via Ephrafa. For now, all adversity is forgotten as they arrive at the foot of Watership Down and climb it all at one go, finding a ready-made warren with a great burrow at the top. So Hazel's leadership in getting them to the top safely and digging the new warren is made completely irrelevant. In fact, his only real leadership moment here is a gentle reminder that Fiver found this place. The arrival of Keehar returns the initiative to Hazel, as he quickly realises the potential of this ally, and the pace of the film makes him come across as more ruthless, as he mentions the doe problem, and the idea of Keehar searching for them. This leads directly to the comedic outcome of a plan to make sure Keehar comes up with the idea himself, at the end of which an aside to Hazel makes it clear that this was exactly the intention. However, with Keehar gone and seemingly not coming back, Hazel returns to the already set-up idea of raiding the farm. And this time, it is actually a marginally more sensible decision if Keehar really isn't coming back, as opposed to being motivated by the wish to show off to Holly when he arrives back from the mysterious warren to the south. But this version of the raid is less successful than in the book, as no hutch rabbits are rescued, and Hazel gets shot. With Fiver having found Hazel by means of a musical interlude, Hazel returns to the down in far better shape than in the book, and Keehar arrives back as well, having found nothing they did not already know about. So Hazel's idea of Keehar helping them was actually of no use here, beyond confirming that there were no closer warrens. As Keehar digs out the shotgun pellets, Holly goes into more detail about Ephrafa, which Hazel has decided to raid with no inkling of a plan, at least that we hear of yet. The journey to Ephrafa is brief, with Keehar at least of some real use as a hair cover. Bigwig's encounter with a fox and a Y patrol leads to their being tracked, and at the arch under the Iron Road, before even finding the means of getting away, Hazel says to Bigwig that it is time, as the Y patrol is now very close. Even Bigwig starts to say it is too soon. This Hazel is either audacious or foolhardy at this point in the story compared to the original. With a last snatched conversation about communicating via Keehar, Bigwig tells Hazel to make sure he finds a means of escape, and they part company. With Bigwig having joined Ephrafa, Hazel and Blackberry end up at the punt with Keehar, where the much-needed escape idea is hatched by Blackberry. Hazel tells the flippant Keehar to go and meet with Bigwig and try to be subtle. This Keehar, while funny for us, doesn't really do subtle. We next see Hazel in the rain by the river as the abortive escape goes ahead. He tells Silver to go to the Iron Road to see what is happening. Later, as the escape reaches the bridge under the Iron Road and Keehar attacks Woundwort, we see Hazel in his supplementary role as rope chewer. The escapees arrive at the punt and are ordered aboard. As Woundwort arrives at the river, Hazel cries out, seemingly to impersonate Keehar, gives the rope one last bite and leaps aboard the punt. The escape, though seemingly even more precarious than in the book, has worked. And now, due again to the need to summarise the plot, Hazel is spared all the stresses of the river test and the journey back to Watership Down. He bids farewell to Keehar by moonlight, and we promptly find ourselves back on Watership Down in a contented warren with does. But this does not last long. The news from Silver of the arrival of the Great Patrol forces Hazel to make the instant decision to make a stand rather than leave. Any who want to can go. As in the book, it is one of his bravest moments. He orders the holes blocked up, and we find ourselves in the honeycomb, though it is never called this in the film. And now his order is that they all stay. The chance to leave has expired. Hazel, in another true moment of brave leadership, decides to try to reason with Woundwort. His meeting with the General is very true to the book, and ultimately just as futile, but it still leaves Woundwort thinking that Flaley, or Bigwig, is Chief Rabbit, whether by accident or design. And now the siege begins, though in the daytime here rather than overnight. The attack on the warren is much faster paced here, with the digging seemingly intended to gain quick access to the warren. Hazel commentates on where the Ephraffans are concentrating their efforts, and then Fiver, with appropriate promptness, goes into his trance. After making a sound that scares two digging Ephraffans, he sits up and delivers his supernatural message to Hazel about a dog loose in the woods. The image for the last episode is of Hazel putting two and two together as he forms his plan to defeat Ephrafa. Taking three others with him, Heisenkley getting to represent does in active mode in this version alongside Dandelion and Blackberry, they set off for the farm after Hazel gives Bigwig his final order to defend the run the others hide in. He doesn't tell Bigwig the plan, as in the book, because there isn't time, but also presumably so a dying Bigwig will not be able to give it away. Leaving Heisenkley at the iron tree, telling her everything will depend on her when the time comes, Hazel leads the two bucks to Nuthanger. Hazel, unlike the book, prays to Lord Frith in the form of the sun as he runs up the lane and seems to get a non-committal answer. He leaves Blackberry in the lane leading to the farm rather than where it meets the road. And I have to say that this Hazel's use of three rabbits, assuming that Heisenkley is a fast enough runner, makes more sense than the book, considering the distance they must cover, though in the book the chase seems a bit slower and more episodic than the uninterrupted chase we get here. Hazel and Dandelion arrive at Nuthanger where events unfold just as in the book, up to the cat leaping on Hazel after the dog's rope snaps. We hear a single phrase from Lucy, the farm girl, telling the cat to leave Hazel, rather than the two-chapter cliffhanger we get in the book before discovering his fate. And that, sadly, is the end of Hazel's involvement in the main narrative. We do not get to see Hazel enjoy the fruits of his labours in a victorious and safe warren on Watership Down. The next time we see him, it is an autumn day a few years later. Rather than meeting Elachera in his burrow, he seems to meet the Black Rabbit in a more benign form above ground. Here, Elachera and the Black Rabbit have effectively been merged, and his owlslet is not such a terrible thing to join as in the book. And so, after leaving his body lying on the ground, with the words of Frith's promise narrating the scene, Hazel flies with the black rabbit towards Frith's physical form, in a scene that still makes my eyes glisten. The 1984 Australian Broadcasting Corporation radio play of Watership Down is overall the longest and most accurate dramatic retelling of the original story to date, though the dialogue is almost completely re-scripted from the book. It also has practically no influence from the film that had been released a mere 6 years earlier. At the start, Hazel is referred to as not even having a burrow. In this version, Blackberry does not speak, so Hazel has to rely on his own wits a bit more, such as finding the piece of wood at the River Emborne with Dandelion. Here, Hazel must apparently be elected before he can be called Ra, which he emphasises when referred to as such by Cowslip, and he seems to agree with Fiver about this strange rabbit a lot sooner. And after Bigwig is snared and survives, Hazel is elected by the group, with no apparent objections from Bigwig. Here, Hazel Ra gets to meet the mouse on Watership Down, which explains his wider idea of working with other wildlife. However, he has to fend off a near mutiny over the feeding of Keehaw. The raid on Nuthound Farm liberates only does, both of whom help nurse the wounded Hazel back to health at the foot of the hill, after he is found by Fiver and Pipkin after being shot. Hazel also has a vision of Elachra while awaiting rescue. Hazel seems to rather unwisely share his plan with everyone before they set off for Ephrata, though Bigwig does not get the detailed instructions until they reach the River Test. It seems that Hazel and his companions take cover much closer to Ephrata than in the book. There is a plot break after the escape from Ephrata begins, with the gaps being filled in flashbacks. First, Hazel receives his warning about new rabbits from the mouse, before we learn exactly what has made Woundwort so angry. Having just jerked the rope of the punt free, Hazel leapt onto it, in a rare moment seemingly influenced by the 1978 film, and Woundwort had delivered an angry rant about how he will find them. Fiver's trance underground more or less hands Hazel his plan on a plate, and we learn that Blackberry was present all this time, as he takes part in silence. After being caught by the farm cat, we hear of what happened to Hazel from a human point of view, as in the book, with the exception that Hazel is kept at the farm to recover for a few weeks, so Crawley has to wait far longer to find out the fate of his comrades. The older Hazel gets to have a conversation with Dandelion before meeting in his sleep with what is definitely Elachra. And, as he leaves the warren, he hears a doe tell a story of rabbits who swam a stream and sailed down a river before he leaves his body behind. The 1996 sequel to Watership Down, Tales from Watership Down, gives us a chance in Part 3 to find out how the Warren on the Down developed in the months following the defeat of Ephrata. But first, there are 2 sections of the book with additional tales of Elachra and Rabscuttle, during which we have glimpses of Hazel post-Bellum. It is the May of the following year, and all seems well on Watership Down. Keehaw has returned, and Hazel seems to be able to take things a bit easy as endless tales of Elachra are told. However, things start to get less settled as in the disturbing story The Hole in the Sky, Elachra becomes delirious and imagines he is Hazel telling Heisenslade to take care of the Warren while he is on Y Patrol with, of all rabbits, Campion. This leads us into the rabbit's ghost story, told by the captured, then adopted Ephraim Coltsford, who is a difficult character. We hear that Hazel has urged patience with him, and also his concern about young rabbits being taken out on patrol for too long by Blackavar. This has been caused by one of them thinking he saw the ghost of Woundwort. Hazel is sensitive to these fears and tries to be reassuring, which leads to Coltsfoot's terrifying tale, at the end of which Fiver has to intervene to reassure the others about the nature of ghosts. In The Secret River, in Part 3 of Tales, Hazel learns of an unusual phenomenon encountered by some of the does in Ephrata, through which they learned of the far-off warren of Thiniel and the strong doe Flyeth. More of her later. Hazel gets down to the business of establishing the new warren between Watership Down and the now friendly Ephrata, and asks Keehaw to find a suitable site. A meeting is arranged with Campion Ra at the new site. However, this has to be abandoned after Keehaw warns them of exceptionally cold weather on the way. And it is during that cold weather that Flyeth of Thiniel arrives on Watership Down. in the winter burrow on the scarp slope. The discovery of an unconscious, possibly dead human on the pathway that runs past the warren triggers Flyeth into expressing her feelings about the location of the warren. She therefore becomes the first of several difficult characters that Hazel Ra has to deal with. Flyeth fills in the gaps in her story of leaving Thyniel, which was because of her absolute paranoia about the white blindness or myxomatosis. Appropriately, she had initially planned to go to Ephrafa, not knowing what it was like, before hearing of its defeat by Watership Down. After the sad loss of Acorn, the first of those who left Sandalford with Hazel to die, there is a thaw, and work on the new warren continues. Hazel's vision of a new mixed warren is coming to fruition and is a real manifestation of his vision as a leader. With captured Ephrafa Groundsel as its chief, with the core of the Owlsler consisting of Bigwig's former superior from Ephrafa, Avens, as well as Strawberry and Buckthorns from Watership Down. However, back at Watership Down, a group of younger does is forming around Flyeth, who, after rescuing Hazel from a small dog on the scarp slope, is told about the secret river. However, she is still talking of the white blindness and is now saying that the warren on Watership Down should be abandoned due to the seeming frequent proximity of humans to it, and she seems intent on taking over the warren in order to do so. Bigwig wants to kill her, but Hazel listens to wiser counsel from Blackberry and Fiver. The fact is that one good reason for a new warren is to ensure that the one on Watership Down doesn't get too big. So why not just let Flyeth leave with her followers to found another one? In the wake of Flyeth's departure, Hazel has the idea that a female Chief Rabbit might not be such a bad idea after all, and he invites his mate Heisensley to become co-chief. And Heisensley's abilities in this role are rapidly demonstrated as she has to rescue an injured doe who is travelling from Ephrafa. There now follow two challenges to Hazel's leadership in the form of two bucks. The first is Sandwort, an arrogant young buck who starts leading out patrols that place other young rabbits at risk. The culture Hazel has nurtured on Watership Down is one where you do not need permission to go raiding or on patrol. However, Sandwort abuses the privilege and seems unconcerned when he loses a young rabbit on one expedition. He and his group are also arrogant and rude towards the older rabbits. Clearly, Sandwort could end up challenging Hazel for the leadership. He is even said to have his own Owlsler. It is clear that measures that exceed what Hazel would prefer may be necessary to deal with him. Fortunately, his own recklessness is his undoing, as he manages to get trapped in a human-made pit where he nearly dies. He only gets out after some kind human children find him, and is a changed rabbit after that. Hazel has dodged a bullet, which makes a change. But the next bullet is Stonecrop, a large, escaped hutch rabbit who reeks of humans. Hazel rescues him from nearly being killed by two bucks. However, his smell, which came from being held by human children for far too long, is very alarming, and Hazel resisting him being killed, indeed sheltering him in his burrow, begins to become an issue. Bigwig warns him his position is in jeopardy. But Fiver has the idea of taking Stonecrop to the new warren of Left Lane. He has one of his feelings that Stonecrop will be accepted there. And indeed he is, as they arrive to the new warren being attacked by weasels, who flee upon spelling Stonecrop, who runs at them with no awareness of the danger they pose. Has Hazel had another joint division with Fiver? How else to explain his close protection of such a challenging rabbit? The last chapter Richard Adams wrote about his world on Watership Down focuses on Campion, who grows bored of being chief at Ephrafa. He is a rabbit who needs to be on patrol, and at a summit between the three Ras, Hazel, Groundsel and Campion, it becomes clear that Campion has been coming to Left Lane to take enthusiastic rabbits out on wide patrol, as there are few volunteers at Ephrafa, a result of Woundwort's legacy. After some tension, Hazel takes counsel with Fiver and suggests Campion effectively gives up his leadership of Ephrafa to join Watership Down. And so Campion ends his days as he would have wished to, on wide patrol, after encountering two cats one rainy April afternoon. The last reference to Hazel written by Richard Adams is where he refers to losing rabbits from your own warren being different from rabbits from other warrens dying, as you know them personally. It is characteristic of a rabbit who, at his heart, is truly compassionate. Chronologically, the next time we meet Hazel is in the epilogue of Watership Down, which was written 24 years earlier. But it is still very poignant to know that the last chapter of Tales from Watership Down was where its author last gave voice to this incredible character, Hazel Ra. Summing up. The Hazel of the 1978 film's effectiveness as a leader is only partly degraded, mainly by the need to summarise the plot so much. Mainly this results in us not knowing if he has planned for certain things, and there are no internal monologues to confirm his thinking. But there are also such moments as his scouting out Nuthanger Farm with no reason yet to do so, and his whole idea of using Kihar to find does is rendered redundant. However, overall, this is still very much the Hazel of the book. The same broadly applies to the 1984 radio play. In fact, here Hazel has to do more of the thinking due to Blackberry's silence. And then we come to Tales, in which Hazel, the chief lessee, has become Hazel the war leader and hero, who must now win the peace. Some of the matters he has to deal with in these stories seem a little disappointing when compared to his heroics in the original book. But then again, wasn't that a lesson Elachrar himself learned upon his return from the warren of the Black Rabbit of Inlay? No amount of heroism guarantees you eternal respect from the young or others who are not around to see such heroism. As ever, he is wise enough to take counsel and avoid brutal solutions if at all possible. And there is also his and Richard Adams' concession to late 20th century politics, the co-leadership with Heisenflay. While you might say that this was too much of a concession to changing times, you might equally say that the agency of Doze in the 1972 novel was too little. For me, the compassionate Hazel, having had to treat Doze as a bit of a commodity during the struggle to build his new warren, shows strength of character in sharing his leadership in peacetime. But we have now only reached 1996 in the history of Hazel's dramatic portrayal, halfway through the last century. How will his character fare in the longest-running versions of Watership Down which are to come? Next time, we look at the portrayal of Hazel from the 1999 TV series to the 2018 Netflix miniseries.